very active. So here we had overnight another charismatic Bhutto.
He gave her the mantle of the party. And in a normal Islamic society, they would give it to the eldest son. But Zulfikar Ali Bhutto gave it to the eldest child, the one he thought could best do the job, and it was a woman.
I suppose that was where I witnessed that transformation, was my friend as an Oxford graduate into that debut politician. It was a huge, ongoing struggle for the clearing of her father's name. Then things went from bad to worse.
If my father is executed, I honestly do not believe we can talk of Pakistan as it exists today. We cannot talk of a viable country. Pakistan cannot stay united. Pakistan will disintegrate.
Mir went around the world to lobby leaders to try and save Zulfikar from the executioner's noose.
Our message to General Zia is that release my father and hold free election and let the people decide the fate of the country.
We have come out against the military regime headed by General Zia al-Haq, which we feel is acting in a manner which is prejudicial.
We were so isolated, and I just used to pretend that it's not going to happen.
Zia knew as long as Zulfikar is alive, Zia can never stay president of the country.
He won't let me off. He knew it. He said, he will never let me go.
What do you think that your father would look back on as his own mistakes?
Perhaps choosing General Zia as Chief of Staff?
The billboards of the evening newspapers was Bhutto to hang all over. I remember being really hit, sort of like in the stomach.
Father, very intelligent, Coriolanus in Shakespeare, finally falls out with his own supporters, weakens, and his enemies pounce on him. The whole story of the Bhuttos has strong elements of a Greek tragedy.
He called the jail superintendent and said, "This is the last meeting." And he said, "Yes." He said, "Has the date been fixed?" He said, "Yes." He said, "For when has it been fixed?" He said, "Tonight." My father said to him, "Well, make arrangements for me to shave, to have a bath. It's beautiful earth, and I want to be clean." And he said that tonight I'll be free. My father was very calm, and he talked of family matters. He talked of party matters, and I keep seeing his face. I said that I'd like to hug my father goodbye. He'd been the president, the prime minister. He brought them back from the camps of India. They wouldn't even open the cell doors for me to kiss him goodbye. Said, "This is goodbye until the final meeting." And those were the last words he spoke to either my mother or myself.
Well, I don't want to say much. I came just to tell you that was the personal tragedy. And they've tried to break our father. They've tortured him for 2 years. They couldn't do that. They tried to ruin his political name, and now they've killed him. We have nothing to be ashamed of. They have buried a martyr today.
Zia's rule proved to be the worst period in Pakistan's history. A fear enveloped the country, and many people said, if they can hang Bhutto, who the hell are we?
I don't know, after my father's death, I came back to Pakistan and the whole atmosphere changed. I mean, they kept hauling my mother and sister off to different jails. Everything was under martial law order. I mean, they had a martial law order that our last name wasn't allowed to be in the newspapers.
They turned our home into prison, where nobody could enter, where nobody could go out. When you're in detention, it's not the physical aspect which matters, it's the mental. It's having somebody to communicate with.
Zia did not want any activity from the family. So if the brothers are outside the country and the wife and the daughter is in prison, no activity.
Zia was an Islamist. He began a process of Islamicizing Pakistan.
General Zia said, "We are the true defenders. Israel without Judaism would collapse. Pakistan without Islam would collapse."
He imposed Sharia law.
Sharia is a divine, utopian, heavenly code of conduct. Sharia on earth means whatever the leader says Sharia means. But of course, the area in which they had the most devastation was in women's rights, what's often referred to as the hudud laws. The punishment for these crimes is actually mandated by the Quran.
There was this notorious law under which if a woman was raped, she had to produce 4 male witnesses to the penetration. If she couldn't produce that, then she would go to jail for sex outside marriage, which was illegal.
Public hangings, public floggings.
Harsh though they may seem to us, all those punishments are perfectly acceptable under Islamic law.
People are not allowed to travel. People are not allowed to voice their own opinions.
I believe in freedom of thought, freedom of expression.
People are not allowed to voice their ideas. They're not allowed to do anything at all.
It is freedom with responsibility, not freedom for the sake of freedom or free for all.
What I am sitting and doing right now in this drawing room is a crime under martial law regulation.
Then he had this extraordinary break in his favor. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan.
Pakistan was important from the very beginning. For strategic reasons, you only have to look at a map.
I think the administration thought that the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was a major threat to the United States, that the Soviet Union would dominate the northern part of the Persian Gulf, it would threaten Western oil supplies, and the communists would have scored a major victory.
The main task became defeat the Russians, whatever the cost. And that made this squalid dictator into a plucky fighter for freedom. Brzezinski actually went to the Afghan border.
That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
A lot of these religious primers, which were teaching kids in the madrasas, all the jihadi rhetoric, Kaf, the letter K, Kaf is for Kalashnikov. All these textbooks were specially printed by the University of Nebraska. Reagan introduced these guys to the press corps once and said, "These are the equivalents of our founding fathers." And some of us watching at the time was sort of joking, which one is Washington? Which one is Jefferson? Where's Benjamin Franklin among them?
The two boys, Murtaza and Shanawaz, were very disillusioned and they went to Afghanistan.
Shanawaz was the youngest of the 4 kids. They all adored him so much, such a nice, kind kid.
He was always smiling. Benazir always talked about him being incredibly handsome and a great charmer. He wasn't as intense and serious as Murtaza was.
Mir had the arrogance of the man of the family. He needed to feel he was doing something, so there was a lot of sort of talk.
The underground resistance, if you're shot off the street, then you're going to go underneath and blow the hell out of the place. So there's going to be a lot of trouble.
They were trying to build a group from outside the country to overthrow the government of Zia.
Their politics were a bit more radical than hers.
There's been a dramatic development in the Damascus hijack today.
The Pakistan government has been claiming that the man behind the hijacking is the eldest son of Pakistan's former president, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Murtaza vowed to avenge their father's death.
The hijacking of the PIA airliner took place. Then it had become very, very difficult.
Has Murtaza crossed the line between political activity in exile and terrorism? The Pakistan government says he has.
Benazir's brothers were branded as terrorists.
In the end, the Pakistan government capitulated to the hijackers, agreeing to swap the political prisoners for the hostages aboard the PIA plane.
Benazir was charged with connection to those terrorist brothers. Zia threw her into a Class C cell, the desert of sin. Class C are the lowest quality cells that there are.
I walked up and down and up and down and up and down. What the hell is there to do when you're locked up in solitary confinement?
She had not talked to anyone for several years. When I went to visit her, she could not talk. She would write on a piece of paper whatever she wanted to tell me because her jaws had locked.
It would be so hard, I can't tell you. And my ear is hurting me.
She had some ear complaint and they called a doctor. They said, you're not well and we're going to give you medicine. But the medicine they were giving her, I think, were tranquilizers because my mother noticed she was becoming like a zombie.
I think his basic thought was that he could kill her.
By the time the Afghan war was in full swing, Zia knew that the U.S. couldn't do without him.
The Reagan administration simply let the Pakistani dictator decide how billions of U.S. dollars would be used to fight the Soviets. And Zia gave them to the most extreme Islamic groups.
That is the period when Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, ISI, became a powerful octopus-like agency with a finger in every sphere of public life in the country. Massive spying apparatus, massive budget.
The ISI is the NSA, the CIA, and the Pentagon all rolled into a single body. It is, in some sense, a shadow military force.
The ISI would use enormous funds to actually create organizations which they armed and then used in Afghanistan.
The Mujahideen is the term that we use to describe the diverse groups of militants and fighters, some Afghan, but many from outside of Afghanistan. Fighters all over the world who gathered to repel the Soviet invasion.
Osama bin Laden was a part of that movement. He was a particularly well-resourced and effective militia leader.
We thought that defeating the Soviet Union was so important that we didn't care that we were actually supporting Osama bin Laden and people who were his allies.
As far as Pakistan was concerned, it destroyed the social fabric of that country because you had armed groups backed by the military regime running wild in the country. Another of the sort of numerous ironies, the Americans got rid of Bhutto because of the nuclear bomb. Then General Zia, their man, is in power and uses the fact that he's become absolutely necessary for the United States to fight the war in Afghanistan to basically build the bomb. And that is what he did.
I say that it is the right of any developing country to acquire the modern technology. And amongst the modern technology is the nuclear technology.